Delanea Davis and her team innovate medical-grade meditations delivered via mobile phones to help improve mental well-being, change habits, chronic pain management, and reduce opioid dependency. This mindfulness tech services company, Cloud9 Online, is a Hartford, Connecticut-based firm which reduces hospital readmission rates, accelerates recovery time, and improves insurer loss costs. In this episode of Pause for Purpose, our featured discussion leader Delanea Davis shares her journey and her purpose, as she invites us all to consider meditation, journaling, and other options to change our everyday life.
All righty, welcome everybody. First of all, we are thrilled. My name is Joyce Cohen, and that's Vicki Thomas, Vicki Wave, and we're just thrilled to have you all here. This is our Wednesday Pause for Purpose hour, and we met Jay and Delaney actually several weeks ago, and have talked since and learned about what they're both doing, and we just thought we've got to have them on. So I'm going to quickly introduce Jay. It's a pleasure to welcome you, welcome Delaney, welcome all of your colleagues, and welcome all of our usual people who come to our Pause for Purpose sessions. Jay Donaldson is a marketing expert. She's a lifelong learner, and she finds her professional purpose in that whole space of health, fitness, and wellness. And it's really with that brief introduction, Jay, it's all yours, and you'll introduce Delanea. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Joyce and Vicki. Yeah, I connected up with Joyce and Vicki, I don't know, a couple months ago through Hojo, Hojo is somewhere on the screen. And it's been a great group, and you've brought in some great experts in their field. So we were so happy that Delanea could be a part of this. So real quickly, I met Delanea back probably 10, 12 years ago when she was at the tail end of her tenure with the Travelers, where she was vice president of market research, did a lot of product innovation there, then spun off on her own to become an entrepreneur and start her own organization using research as sort of the basis for meditation and spiritual healing, as well as consulting and coaching, life coaching. She's written a couple books, and we got to know each other very well when she joined my organization as a facilitator for our annual retreat, when we were trying to really define what my organization's purpose was at that point. I had a branding and marketing company, and used our annual retreat to help us really deliver on our strategy. And I won't go through the whole detail, but I will say at the end of the 3 days, there were actually tears in the room because we had found what we really had come together to look for. And the team just looked at me and said, Jay, I think we're here. I think this is it. And the bottom line was it was all about health and wellness. And that's where our organization started to focus. So fast forward 8 years, and here's Delanea now doing her own thing. And we've come back together again. This time she's the CEO with an organization that she has started, and I'm helping to bring this whole innovation to life. And I'll let Delanea talk about what that innovation is, because it's cool and rewarding, and it's going to help a lot of people in the world that need help right now.
Thank you. Well, thanks everybody for the opportunity to spend an hour with you today and share my story. I see some familiar faces on here, and those that know me well know that the one thing I'm gun shy talking a lot about is my journey and how my life began and what got me here. But I'm finding that by taking ourselves out of our comfort zone, that's how we grow the most. So what I'd like to do is share my screen, and I thought I'd share some pictures with you to help tell my story. And I would say feel free to interject and ask questions along the way. Give me 1 second here. You could tell I come from corporate because I live in PowerPoint here. Okay, here we go. So today what I want to talk to you about is this idea of, for those of us that know we have found our purpose, we wake up every day and we're feeling joy. You know, we have this fervor and excitement to get out of bed in the morning. And sometimes we may not realize that we think we're on our path, we're not quite on our path. So I wanted to share with you what that journey's been like for me. So at a high level, my purpose is to create tools that help transform suffering into joy. And when we feel joy, that's the path to our purpose that becomes illuminated. So if I roll back the clock to 1982, this is a great picture. I'm in the third row from the bottom, second to the left. I'm wearing a pink shirt. I'm in a blue collar town called Naugatuck in Connecticut. And this was a very special memory for me because at 7 years old, I learned how to French braid my own hair. And for those women on the call that have had braids in their hair as kids, they know that French braid was the Mac Daddy of the braid world. So I remember even feeling this slight nervousness. I hope I don't get in trouble because I've braided my own hair. It's a class picture, it's permanent. And for me, those braids are something that helped me feel like I fit in a room of kids who I knew had something different than I did, which was a mom and dad at home. So for me, I was blessed to be raised by my grandmother, and she was a Polish grandmother, so I can clean like nobody's business to this day. But for me, you know, while I was like the other kids, on the inside, I felt like I was different since my home composition was not the same as others. So especially in those formative years, I always had this cognizance of, I want to fit in. I want to look like everybody else. I don't want to be different. I don't want to be stand out in any way. And so for me, like this picture, I'm proud of the braids, but also it was a memory for me that was very permeated throughout my childhood of assimilation. So I think it's important to share with you that the values that my dad and my grandmother instilled in me were, number one, never go to bed mad. So we were a very loving environment that I grew up in. The second value was always say I love you when you leave the house, because as my dad would say, you never know when the last time you're going to see somebody. Anything can happen. And so those goodbyes should be from the heart and very meaningful. The other was always help others in need. So that meant that we never quite knew who was going to show up at the dinner table. This was back in the 70s when I don't think it was illegal to pick up hitchhikers. So, you know, my dad being a product of the 60s often opened up his pocket, opened up his car, opened up his home. He would help anybody, and he literally would give you the shirt off your back if you needed it, which made a big impact on me from a very young age. And the fourth one was that words and music were sacred. So my dad was very poetic in how he talked. I grew up listening to Bob Dylan music. I was named after a Bob Dylan song. And so from a very young age, music and words and poetry and writing, it was very magical to me. And I loved how a certain song on the radio could trigger an overwhelming emotion that made you feel good or made you feel nostalgic. And I had a deep respect for that. My other favorite thing to do as a kid is I was an avid tree climber. So to this day, I'm a really fast eater because I wanted to hurry up and get back to what I was doing outside. And for me, back then, we didn't have the term mindfulness, but for me, spending time up in any tree I can find in the neighborhood to the tippity top, I'd feel like the tree sway with the wind, and I noticed that nobody ever looked up. So even though I was out in plain view, nobody ever could see that I was hanging out up in the tree and just spending time up there. I would sing in the trees quite a bit. I really loved singing that song, Leaving on a Jet Plane by John Denver. Even though it was kind of a sad song, it was one of my favorite ones as a child. You know, otherwise, I was an only child. And the thing that I hesitate to share, but I think it's really important to the story, is that the reason why my grandparents raised me, and my dad actually was supporting all of us, was that my mom was mentally ill and spent a lot of time in hospitals, and I was none the wiser. My grandparents and dad did a really good job of protecting me from that information. So to me, the norm was I didn't always get to see her. Sometimes I would get to see her, but that I knew that made me different. I didn't really use it. why. But yeah, there was this permeance of missing my mom and wishing that she was here. I kind of went along with some of those earlier years. So from a glass is empty perspective, an outsider looking in might say, that poor child was disadvantaged, she was vulnerable, she was at risk, right? She didn't have this traditional family model of it. The glass full perspective is, I was unconstrained in a good way, I was completely protected, and I grew up in a home of unconditional love.
Delanea, your voice is really echoing and far away. Does anyone else hear that?
Oh, I think if everybody hits mute, that might help.
Everyone needs to hit mute. That would be great.
Okay, hopefully that's a little better. So on the one hand, there were no expectations put on me. You know, there was no pressure of when you grow up, you're going to be this or you're going to do that. You know, there was no expectation of necessarily college because my family moved here from Poland many, many years ago. And so they did the best they could with what they had. On the other side of the hand, there also were no limitations. So I always had this feeling growing up that if I want it, there's no way I won't get it, whatever it is. So if we jump ahead to 1988, now I'm in middle school, and I was very proud of having the biggest hair of anyone in the school. So I went from this phase of I just want to fit in, and I was aware that I was different, but didn't want people to know, to I'm just going to be who I am. And for me, the way that presented was I loved writing poetry, especially during class when I was supposed to be paying attention. I loved reggae music, which was unusual of the time. And here I'm wearing my Converse All-Star sneaker. I was a manager of the girls basketball team. So this leadership element started to emerge, and I noticed that while I was different, people always listened to what I had to say. And remember when we're all in 7th, 8th grade, those are the years that we start noticing boys, they start noticing us. And one of my friends in school would say to me, you know, Delanea, boys would like you if you weren't so weird. But at that time, I was like, I'm comfortable with who I am and how I am. And that presented with crazy hair and different music styles and literature styles. Then in 1998, now I'm a college graduate. I was the first in my family to graduate from college. And my first job, I was fortunate enough to work at the state legislature for a state senator. So that's me with a thigh master. So now I kind of moved back into this chapter of, well, now I want to fit in again, right? Like I'm in this intimidating environment. I started working on political campaigns. I'd get angry constituents calling me and wanting answers about various things happening in their town. And so I kind of moved back into this. I want to look like these people. I want to talk like these people. And depending on who that person was, I had to be a bit of a social chameleon. So if I was working on a campaign and I was going door to door, it was important for people to trust me. So I had to talk like them, look like them. On the flip side, if I'm on the floor of the state legislature during a hearing, I kind of have to step into that character too. So I didn't realize at 22 years old how valuable that training became. And nowadays we'd say it was emotional intelligence, knowing how to read people, now knowing how to put people at ease. And the one thing I always was especially moved by is when people that would call in and call their state senator when they were upset or in pain over something. I remember this one individual would come to the state house to see my senator, and he was he drove limousines, and he would come because he felt like he wasn't getting heard by anyone else. He'd come in person, and we had a really big file on him. But I had a lot of compassion and empathy for people that couldn't help themselves and were vulnerable and in need. And so in suffering, basically. So if I jump ahead to 2008, now this is the days that Jay's referencing. That's me on the left in the tan shirt, putting a ninja scarf around my boss's head. So I, at this point, had gotten my master's degree in market research methods. And even though you could tell from the young age, I was very creative and I loved nature, but I also had this affinity for numbers and data. in studying people and what made them tick. And so I think the underlying thing was I wanted to understand why people did what they did, or even when they knew there was something they should do and they wouldn't do it, why? So learning how to design surveys and run focus groups and get people to be able to tell you what they were thinking and feeling, obviously it was a very powerful tool for personal growth and development, but also in businesses. So in this context, it was about helping travelers insurance understand what do their customers need, what are their pain points, are there products or services that don't yet exist that need to exist. And when people think of insurance, they might think, well, it's a boring category or a sector of business. But the truth is, insurance, when somebody has a loss of some sort, whether it's, you know, a property loss or there's an injury at work, that's when people are at their most vulnerable. And here's where, you know, working in an insurance company, you have an opportunity to kind of be that knight in shining armor who gets to be there in a person's moment of need and reassure them and help them put the pieces back together. So in this instance, the toolkit that helped alleviate the suffering was on an insurance product. So I was there for 7 years, and while my tendency was I need to assimilate because I'm now in the financial services industry and I can't be wearing my Converse All-Star sneakers. At the same time, you could see this playfulness in this picture. Culture was really important to me, and building a team and getting them to feel engaged and connected and running it like we're a tight-knit family. So that was kind of the way that I was weaving in my authenticness in an environment where I knew I probably had to follow some rules. So while at Travelers, the learning didn't stop for me. I spent a year doing industrial and organizational psychology PhD level classes with the idea of what is change management. So if my data tells a company this is a change you need to make in order to improve the outcome, but the stakeholders don't want to take that step, I really wanted to understand why. How does the brain working in all this, right? Or from there, it got me into studying hypnosis because I wanted to understand the subconscious mind. And when the subconscious mind overrides your rational thinking, why is that? So I went into it thinking, there's no way I'm actually going to use hypnosis. I just want to learn about the brain. But as part of that training, I had to do 100 hours of hypnotherapy sessions with people to practice on. And while it was not my intention to leave my comfort zone of working at this great Fortune 100 company, you know, leading a team, it was a very lucrative career. I was happy, but learning about the brain and learning about what underlies someone not wanting to change is often fear and pain. And as part of my hypnotherapy training, I was very taken by the fact that that's one tool. Hypnosis is one tool for alleviating suffering that radically changes everything in a very short time. So versus someone going to a talk therapist for years, there are forms and methods in hypnotherapy that in a matter of weeks, somebody's lifelong problem, whether it's a phobia or an emotional thing, is gone. I couldn't not take notice, and it gave me pause. What started happening from there was I wondered, am I in the right environment anymore? Like, it's like the more I knew, the more I was uncomfortable that I didn't belong in that environment anymore. I mean, while I didn't know what that meant, it was only so long before I had to stop and say, you're here to do something bigger than this. And which, you know, it took me a good probably year and a half before I had the courage to do something about it. But in the meantime, while I was doing the corporate thing, I continued learning. So I studied neuro-linguistic programming and how certain words activate different parts of the brain, and what makes people trustworthy based on the language that they use. I learned about past life regression, which started to take me further and further out of my corporate world. So I started learning things that I felt like I couldn't share in the corporate world. But the more I just allowed and kind of surrendered myself to this desire to learn and make a difference and take my passion, my creativity, my love of data, my ability to lead people, and say, there's something big here and I just have to trust that it's all going to work out. Now, of course, I waited until the last minute to tell my dad that I was leaving my corporate job and I was going to open up a holistic wellness center, because any parent would try to talk you down off the ledge if you're going to do that. But I knew it was time. It was time to make that shift. And the more we take that pause, and the more we learn, the more we expand and we look within, it could be scary, because it's almost like the more you know and the more you see, you can't unknow and you can't unsee. So once that little earworm took hold that you're meant to do something bigger than this and it's time to go, I took the leap. So this is a great quote I love. When we change our behavior, when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of changing. Consequences give us the pain that motivates us to change. So it probably was 4 straight weeks before I left Travelers. I would drive to the office, park in the garage, that you have to be a vice president to park in the special garage. I'd pull in the garage, and then I would burst into tears and I would say, I just can't go in there right now. And I'd get back in my car and drive back home. And I'm like, what is happening right now? Like, I was so confused because it didn't make sense. But I knew, like, it was an amazing company, amazing culture. Leaving my team was probably the hardest thing for me, but I waited until bonus day and stocks became vested, and I said, I got to go. And from there, this is my original. She's still in the mix. My co-founder, Rita McRae. She actually I will proudly tell you, has been working on the front line doing COVID testing. She's a clinical nurse, social worker, and therapist. And she had been working 7 days a week up until a week ago. Now she's giving herself weekends off. So she and I formed the company. This was in 2014. We opened up a holistic wellness center. We offered hypnosis, Reiki, we did support groups. Rita did spiritual counseling, and as Jay mentioned, I did leadership coaching and would facilitate offsites. And so even though I took a giant step forward and a giant leap of faith that I need to try to answer this calling, the joke was, you'd walk up the stairs to our office, and I would say, if you're going to cry, you have to go see Rita. And if you want to talk about your business, come see me. So to the left of the stairs was Rita's office, to the right of the stairs was mine. And so while I was starting to embrace this major change from corporate, security, to you're jumping off in the deep end in New England, in a part of the country where people may or may not be so open to this. But I stayed safely on the business side while she was addressing kind of the heavier emotion things that people were going through at the time. So as part of that, I mentioned this infectious desire for learning took me to some interesting parts of the country. So here are some fun pictures of experiences that I've had. So I started to learn about within the Hebrew culture, the practice of Kabbalah, which is the mystical side of Judaism, and how Hebrew letters, when you meditate with them, they basically unlock different emotional and spiritual experiences you can have. So for one whole year, while I grew up Roman Catholic, I said, every Friday at sunset, I'm going to adopt my own sadhana, or my own, Kabbalah, my own Kabbalah practice, where at sunset, all my electronics are going off. I'm off the grid until Saturday at noon. I remember actually telling Jay that when I first told her I started doing that as a way to unplug and recharge. She was like, how do you do nothing for an entire night and early morning? And I just said it was such this amazing, expansive experience, because when you schedule like date night with yourself or time alone with yourself, it's this interesting look within where you start to remember who you were when you were a kid. Because they say that when we're young, we're very locked in on our authentic self. So I wanted to write, I wanted to create, I wanted to do things with art. But as we get older, we start going down a path, and next thing you know, we end up working in an insurance company. So that whole year, it was a really transformational experience to have that time just for me. From there, I got exposed to a practice called sadhana, and I see some of my sadhana friends are watching right now. that practice that comes out of the East, you wake up at 4 in the morning, you wear all white, and from 4 a.m. to 6:30 a.m., you do this meditation practice and yoga practice where you're chanting or singing the Sanskrit chants, and you're moving your body. And honestly, like, you think it sounds exhausting, but when it's over and the sun rises, you're supercharged. So that became another cool, different culture, different meditation experience. I learned about crystals. I'm like, what is this whole crystals thing? You know, people were using them thousands of years ago to aid in healing before modern medicine. What did that look like? And then even also now being introduced to Arabic mantras, and when you repeat certain names of God in that culture, what does that feel like in a meditation experience? And of course, along the way, I met some interesting people like these guys. So I share that little clip with you because we have to take ourselves sometimes out of our physical geography to experience things and meet people and be exposed to things. Because for those of you here in Connecticut, if those guys were walking down the street in Hartford, they'd get some funny looks. But in Southern Florida, this was like an open market. People were clearing out of their way as this man's playing his PVC pipe, but people were smiling and laughing and just enjoying these people that felt very comfortable and authentic, walking with the drum and playing a PVC pipe. So really, really great memory. Oops, we'll keep that guy going. Sorry, he wants to keep playing. So now if we want to root all of this in the reality, I told you guys I'm a data person. When I took my head out of the sand and said, okay, enough of the leadership coaching. I know Rita's working with some really heavy stuff here. What's going on in the world around us? And these numbers that you're looking at here, these are all pre-pandemic numbers. So in the United States, 1 out of 10 adults are suffering from some form of addiction. That's 23 million people. Chronic pain number, it's 1 out of 2 adults have a chronic pain issue that they're suffering from. And then mental illness, as I mentioned, my mom was in this camp. I could admit this now, but I was unintentionally avoiding the heaviness of this specifically, even though I opened up this wellness center. I was more drawn to working with people that had a curiosity to learn things versus people that were deeply, deeply suffering. And so as of 3 years ago, I knew, like, it's front and center. You know, these things were in my childhood and afflicting my family members, because this is what I'm supposed to be focusing on. This is what my purpose is really all about. And you can't hide from your purpose forever. It does have a funny way of finding you. So our decision was we would have this pivot and no longer have a holistic wellness center where we're just taking this more grassroots approach to helping people with their wellness and healing. We were going to scale it and do it with technology. So also taking yourself out of your comfort zone. I knew nothing about building apps or, you know, coding data or being HIPAA compliant, but we set out 3 years ago to create a digital platform where we would write these meditations that would teach people how they can get their brain to heal the body. And so what that manifested and turned it into over the last 3 years is we now create these apps that are branded for a hospital or a company. And the meditation topics range from anything that's emotional, like depression, anxiety, you know, right now, sign of the times, PTSD, also to physical pain. So meditation for neuropathy, which is something my dad suffers from today. He's a great example of just with meditation, and for him, it's with a lot of prayer. He reduced his opioid usage by 80% just by incorporating a mindfulness practice every day. So, and that was not even his doctor leading him to do that. He slowly stepped himself down. And for him, his mindfulness practice involves going to church every day, and that's a place of peace for him. Part of meeting people where they are is understanding who do they need to hear this message from for it to stick. And that's all part of my organizational psych training. And if your doctor recommends you to try a guided meditation app to help you with a physical or emotional discomfort you may have, 75% of people say, I would try it if my doctor told me. So I think they call it white coat syndrome, right? So if your doctor says, it must be true. And so that's kind of where things got to. Now here, I couldn't help it. I'm a market researcher. One thing I'll share with you is that while you're probably hearing a lot more about meditation and mindfulness out there, because our friends on the West Coast, Headspace and Calm, they've done a really nice job of bringing this Eastern practice and this 4,000-year-old practice out here, across the country. But what's interesting, when you study the demography of who likes to meditate, and here we'll call it the yogi market, it's interestingly the same. It's actually, I should say, it's my friends, right? That profile skews female, it skews educated, it skews higher on the socioeconomic status side, much more inclined to be healthy and have health insurance. So they're the super healthy market, right? And also it's East and West Coast, which is interesting. But if you look at the people that have chronic pain, right? That's the almost half of the adult population here. That's 47% of us. There's a very different profile. So interestingly, people that suffer from chronic pain are much more likely to be on the other side of the socioeconomic spectrum, less likely to have an education, less likely to have access to healthcare because they are underinsured or they have no insurance at all. And there's an urbanicity skew versus the yogi market that skews Caucasian. So this was important, and the idea of, if we're going to meet people where they are, it's not just about who they hear it from being their doctor. It's also about, what does this content need to be so it resonates? So here, what you're looking at is an example of something that we just released for Trinity Health of New England. And in this example, since it's a Catholic hospital, they said, we would love it if you put a faith-based section into the app and wrote some meditations that are going to really tie people to their faith. And by the way, because the mosques can't have more than one person in it due to COVID, we have these Muslim employees that they no longer have their noontime prayer. So can you create something that has something for Muslims in there? Of course we could do that. And so it's kind of scaled from there. So in the last 4 months, a lot of innovation has happened. And this is where my market research little brain is always spinning on, how can we continually challenge ourselves to meet people where they are? Because for folks that have never meditated, some people say, well, I think it's against my religion, or I can't sit still for long, or I'm not into that. So we have to provide a solution for everyone, no matter where they are. So if it's click on the button that says reflections and just listen for 60 seconds of something that's gonna put your day in a good way, give that a try. And we're actually playing with this idea of, what if we had a button called snap, and you click on snap, and if you feel like you're gonna snap because you're so upset, you're probably not in the mood to sit down and do anything with meditation. But how can we surprise you with what's in the snap folder? Like, is it a laugh track, right? Is it something silly where you do 10 jumping jacks to disrupt the circuit that's in your mind? But the key here is that, for me, I obviously didn't start by doing 24-hour Kabbalah practices or getting up at 4 in the morning. When I was first coming out of that corporate environment, while I was still in it, I would download self-hypnosis apps because I was studying hypnosis, and I had to teach my brain how to slow itself down. And it's almost like a step-down approach. So first you're spending maybe 20 minutes listening to somebody guiding you on what to do, and that's what we do in this app environment. But eventually you can just listen to music and make your mind calm and relax your body. And eventually you can just close your eyes, and in a few moments you can put your mind and body in this relaxed state where you're not feeling pain and you're not feeling upset. So it's a training tool, basically. So here, this was last year. This is some of the great people on the team. The company is now called Cloud9 Online, and it's our digital one. And for me, like, just putting it all out there, right? So I used to say, when we first started, I'd say to Rita, don't say the word psychic, don't say the word spirit, don't say anything weird, you're gonna freak out the business owners. But now it's the world's in a very different place, and the levels of suffering have amplified. So the more tools I have in my toolbox and the more we can put out there for people to try and experience, For some, it's going to get them to take that first step towards that pause, like quieting the mind, looking within, really asking themselves, do they feel joy, or does something need to change? Have they found their purpose, or is it something that's just out of reach? So what I'd like to do now, because somebody said on the call that they've never meditated before, what I'd love to do is play, it's 2 minutes and 57 seconds. It's a meditation that Rita wrote. It's called Pause. And the composer, he's actually here on the line today. His name's Bradford Tilden. So I would invite you all for just 2 minutes and 57 seconds to close your eyes, sit in a comfortable position, and let's see what happens.
Take the next 3 minutes to pause. Find a comfortable position, sitting up, legs and arms uncrossed, allowing the flow of energy up, down, and around your entire body. Meditation is a gift you give yourself. Turn off the images, sounds, and worries in your mind. A place of refuge and safety. So we pause, relax, and slow your mind down. Deep breath in and breathe out. Relax your head, your face, your neck and shoulders. Deep breath in and breathe out. Relax your chest, your back, and your belly. Deep breath in and breathe out. Relax your legs, your knees, your feet and toes. Deep breath in and breathe out. Notice and revel in this state of complete relaxation. Deep breath in and breathe out.
Get it there often.
All right.
Cool.
Okay, so your challenge, and then we'll open it up for questions if there are any. What is your why, right? What is your purpose? Do you feel like you already know what it is?
Yep.
Does it give you joy? And then I would encourage you, it doesn't have to be all these, but what's going to be your pause? Right? Starting with 7 days. You want to journal? Do you want to meditate? Do you want to what's the meditate? Starting. I think somebody needs to mute.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have a toasted cheese sandwich and a
I think Henry's on the line. Can you please ask Henry to use her phone? All right, so enough of the slideshow. Thank you for indulging me with the slide. You could take a lot of course.
All right, well, I gotta go. I gotta watch this. My phone isn't charged.
Okay.
All right.
Ruth,
Sorry.
I'll touch you after.
Marlene, you're both unmute. You need to mute. There's a bunch of folks who need to mute.
Yeah, actually, either Joyce or Vicky, if you can mute Ruth's.
Everybody.
Okay. Questions, comments? So I think I always knew, right? I was drawn to helping people in need because that's the way that I grew up. But I guess now at 45, I've added, right? Help people in need, alleviate suffering in a big way. So that's probably the one thing I would change is in a big way. And I think it will continue to unfold. And I'm going to keep, continuing these practices where I create time to be quiet and be still. And I literally, in this state, one can think of it as prayer. I ask for guidance and I'm continually shown the next step. And as I always say to people, that the right people keep showing up at the right time. And everybody that gets exposed to what we're doing, we keep picking up these great advisors and contributors that want to change the world, and they're doing it. So it's an honor to be part of it with them.
Hey, Delaney.
Hi.
Your name again, Delaney. Delaney.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. My name is Tim. I was really curious how you made that switch from your corporate to this. I mean, you had less tools during that time. Now you have more tools helping people change. But at that time, you were kind of new to it. So how did you do it?
Yeah, well, number one, it was absolutely terrifying. But what I used to bridge me was, because I had that market research training and I was doing some of the leadership coaching in groups like Jay mentioned, I also had picked up some projects here and there where I was able to do market research and at least see income continue to come in as I was building out this wellness center. But in retrospect, what you're picking up on now that I didn't know back then was I had no business going in this business because I had no idea what I was doing. I only had really one or two tools in my toolbox. And as we say in the healing world, you can only bring someone to healing to the level that you've brought yourself. So it really, in order to do it well, we always say to ourselves on the team, you have to do the work, right? You have to be willing to address those maybe the shadow side of what's inside of you and be willing to address it. And that could be things from our past. It could be, residual stuff that we're bringing into our relationships now that we need to clear out and be honest about. So it's continuous work. The learning never does stop.
I just thought that was the magic of your presentation, because in a way, it shows that how we view ourselves and our image of ourselves. It's amazing. What else could we do if we just allowed ourselves to discover that? Because like in your case, you did not expect to be that way. And yet you made that change, and it's inside you. So it's kind of.
Yeah, and to be honest, so I was 23 when my mom passed, and I could not set foot in a hospital for years because it just was a trauma trigger for me. The smell of a hospital, I had a visceral reaction to it. So now the fact that I'm spending my time, talking to doctors and pre-COVID actually going into them, if anything, I will tell you that I have such a profound, and this is pre-COVID, profound respect for people that choose to go into that line of work and help people heal, because the way patients are treating the docs and nurses, I mean, obviously the complexity of regulation and insurance, that the constraints that are put on healthcare, they are just exceptional humans, and they're following their purpose, right? And in many times, well, right now for sure, they're risking their lives to save others. And so I feel like I've never thought of doctors that way until I got to know them in this capacity doing this work now.
Delanea, could you just repeat, someone had just asked, when you were talking about journaling, there was some disruption on the line. Could you just repeat what you said there so everyone could hear it?
Sure. So when you think about what's that something that you're willing to do every day to give yourself a pause, it could be as simple as you wake up 10 minutes earlier, or you wake up before anybody in the house is up, and you just take pen to paper. So for me, I like to meditate in the morning, but I literally will grab my journal and my pen and I'll ask, what do I need to know today? And I'm not thinking about it, but things are getting written down. And when I read it back, I'm like, these are beautiful messages that are coming through for me. So for me, I'm really sorry. I have one for me to be very powerful. Take pen and paper. And if that's not your thing, this is where journal prompts, you know, getting a prompt of what's a provocative question that you want to ask. Like, write your own question. What's my favorite childhood memory? And then just write a little thing. But I say write it knowing you're not showing anyone. It's just for you as one type of practice. Meg is raising her hand.
Thank you. This was terrific. I have to say that much resonated for me, but I wish I had been at your point at 45 instead of so late. But anyway, and I think it, for me, is the way I look at it, this internal work that you are bringing to people is a prerequisite really for changing our outer world. Not that they have to be done together because we can't wait, but I just think it's so important to raise our consciousness, so to speak.
Yeah, obviously things can happen and the external world changes, therefore we have to, like the world that we're in right now. So what I see happening, which I find very encouraging, is that this environmental change around us has been a catalyst for many people that they're alone with themselves and they have two choices. You can have that inner dialogue and understand, like, what are my values? What am I all about? What am I here for? Or you can let the demons take you down. And so because the hospitals are sharing a lot, we know things like the suicide rate among high school skyrocketed, but the media doesn't want to put that in the media because of copycat, right? They don't want to drive more of that behavior. The fact that overdoses are at an all-time high because people are struggling to cope with this change. They're going back to their drugs at the levels they used to be able to handle. Now they can't, and so they're overdosing. And then even the increase in calls for mental wellness services are on a decline, and it's not because they're gone down, it's because people are afraid right now. So all these other things are happening, and so we obviously didn't plan it for any of this, but the fact that we said this back in 2014, we're gonna reach 1 billion lives by 2020. We have no idea how we're gonna do it, but we're gonna put it out there. So now I like to remind Rita, we still have 5 more months before it's the end of the year, but technology was the way to scale it, and now us doing it this way, it allows people to have access to this kind of stuff from home, you know, with their doctors.
So can we, this is a practical question. You say you're branding it for hospitals and companies, but can an individual consumer get this?
Yeah, actually, we made it free. If you go in the app, well, right now, if you go in the App Store, there is an app available with everything that we've created on it called Medimind. So
sorry, it said what?
Medimind, M-E-D-I, like medicine, Medimind, all one word. And it's actually free for 90 days. So we did that actually in response to COVID, but we're just gonna keep it on like that. So anybody can experience it, use it. We're continuously developing content. So every couple weeks, new stuff keeps getting uploaded. So in that version, there's over 400 meditations for sleep, for anything you can think of. We haven't put it in there yet, but we just developed something for pre and post surgery. So if somebody has that coming down the pipe, that's in there. And then this is really fun. This one actually, Susan's on. I'm really excited about this. When I had that sadhana experience in Southern Florida, there was a yoga instructor who became an investor, which is pretty exciting. But we said to her, Susan, we need movement. People are sitting at home now. So she just created 5 meditations where before you put your feet on the ground in the morning, she guides you on like how to stretch and twist and turn, and it feels amazing. In 8 minutes, she does 8 minutes and they're gone like that. So we're excited to add that too, because again, you might say, I don't want to meditate, but who would disagree that they couldn't benefit from a little stretching in the morning?
Hey, Delanea, I got a quick question for you. Why do you think even if it's only 3 minutes, that we have difficulty doing meditation? What
Well,
is
yeah, I love that you asked that, and this is where I would say this. We wouldn't say this publicly. We say this behind the scenes. We have to trick them into it. So for some of the hospitals, they say, what would happen if you did a 60-second something that doesn't sound like a meditation, right? So to your exact point, if somebody is really, really upset, we need to at least shift them to neutral before we get them to positive. So we've been playing around with, and this is where Susan knows more than me about Tai Chi, but she said, you know, what if we start by having them like just slap their body, right? It sounds silly, but what's the thing that's gonna shift their physiology and make them more open? So we want to gamify the experience and give them several things to try and play with. Jan?
Jan, you're on mute.
Yes, there we go. Sorry. Yeah, question. So I'm glad that Meg brought up about availability to consumers. What can you tell us about insurance reimbursement, or what role insurance is playing with the availability of these services through hospitals, or how's that piece working?
Yeah, so thanks to our friends in Silicon Valley that have a bigger war chest than I, Headspace is working on getting a CPT code. So back in 2018, they said they were going to start doing clinical trials and move down that path for FDA clearance, which we haven't seen anything on it yet, but I didn't mention this. We're also doing a clinical trial with Hartford Healthcare with patients who have chronic pain. And we just, as a result of COVID, things had to pause for a moment, but we said, well, let's take this opportunity to record the meditations that are going to be in that clinical trial, also in Spanish. So it's going to be a bilingual clinical study. And believe it or not, it's only going to be the second one in the US that's meditation and Spanish speaking, which is pretty crazy. But things are slowly starting to move down that path. What will happen next with Hartford Healthcare? They're opening up a new spinal center in Westport. And what they want is not just the meditation and mindfulness exercises, but they actually said, well, what if we want to send an individual patient a note to say, how prepared do you feel for surgery this week? Do you have any questions? So now it's this patient engagement tool that makes you have a more close contact with your doctor. And if you have questions about, let's say, your pain management protocol, you have another access point to them. So once it starts to become that level, then it is, I think, covered by insurance because it's now being used as a medical device. I don't know as much about that yet, but that's the conversations now that we're starting to have and plan for 2021.
But then, and how are things being funded in the meantime for, you know, your services and your wellness program and that kind of thing?
So when it's with a hospital, but it also could be employee wellness, either hospital workers or just companies that want employee wellness. They're licensing, think of it like a subscription. So they license for everybody in their organization. They pay a monthly. It's a 12-month term. It's for unlimited usage. So the way that the docs look at it is, we could do this for the cost of a half of an employee, and we have unlimited reach. Because right now, people aren't doing acupuncture or massage therapy. Like a lot of the integrative medicine stuff are either on pause or it's shut down completely. So this is an alternative that's a pain, you know, a drug-free way to address pain. And I want to mention that because of the environment, we know hospitals are really crushed financially with all this. What we said was, we had a pricing model. We only started selling in February, and then all this happened. So we said, look, we'll do deep discounting for the first year because we just want to get it in people's hands. With Hartford, there are 30,000 employees. Hartford Healthcare is 30,000 employees. We said, we're going to give it to you for free, and we're going to check back in August and see where you are. And what we get out of it is we've got data, and we're having these online focus groups, and we're getting intelligence on how can we continuously make sure what we're writing is reaching people. The other is we got a infusion from the state of Connecticut it's called Connecticut Innovations. It's the state's venture arm. So to date, we've raised $700,000. Part of that is in there. And another one of our lead investors I see is joining us from the sunny deck of hers in New Hampshire. Thank you, Karen. Hello, hello.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jinkuya. Have you used this at all with students in schools or brought it into school districts?
Yeah. So during COVID, we actually had met with the folks at Loomis Chaffee, which is one of the private schools here in Connecticut. They have a really cool, for certain kids that are in their last year of school, an entrepreneurial program where they either have like a 4-hour challenge or a 1-week challenge. So we will gear it up to have the kids come in. They get on a bus, they don't know where they're going. So they were going to come to Hartford, come to our office, and for 1 whole week, they were going to be working on creating what meditations do high school students need to have. They were going to do market research on their own and go in the studio. We were going to teach them how to write and record. And then this happened. So I love the innovation at that high school level. Like, who better to reach that audience than have the students come up with some stuff? But we're on hold because of COVID. But for sure, it's a market that we know there's a lot of need.
Have you ever worked with Parkinson's patients, and have you seen any results?
We have not yet. However, we do have one that actually Pam's on the line from the Rare Patient Voice. The organization that does research with over 100,000 patients and caregivers that have rare diseases. And now I think they've added in some less rare diseases. But we told them about minds, and Pam, who's a VP of that organization, she blasted out to their entire 100,000 person audience twice. We got several hundred downloads, and the feedback that we've gotten back, I don't know if anybody was Parkinson's in particular, but the feedback's been really good so far.
I have a question. So when you see people meditating, you see this finger and this finger, these two connect, and you kind of lay them on your lap relaxed. Why? What's the purpose of that?
Yeah, so different cultures in different forms of meditation look and take on different shape. I think this has to do with creating an energy circuit. I think this comes from, I might be wrong, I think it's from Buddhism, meditation as a tradition. My chief mindfulness officer is on the line. He's kind of the savant that knows all things meditation, but within meditation, there's a form called Transcendental Meditation, where there's just one, it could be a syllable, like that you're not saying a word, you're sitting there and that word is repeating in your mind repeatedly. Kabbalah that I mentioned, you're sitting how you want to sit. They encourage you to sit north, but you're visualizing different Hebrew letters, almost getting lit up like a candle. And then you're bringing the flame into the top of your head, through your body. And the cool thing is you're then sending out that flame, whatever the intention is. So if it's for healing, confidence, if it's for fertility, you're sending it out to somebody like a prayer. So I see Jeff just pop back on. Can you tell us why we do this?
Mute it.
More qualified than me to answer. Oh, you're on mute.
Mute it. How?
It's called a mudra, and it's not universal to all meditation styles, but the various mudras symbolize a variety of, I would say, secular but Buddhist originated ideals, whether it's maybe the sword of mindfulness cutting through illusion, or wishing somebody the opening of a lotus, like the opening of their heart. Sometimes you see this, sometimes you see this, sometimes you see this. They're all different, and they all mean different things. When you see a hand facing down on a knee, that refers to the moment of Gautama Buddha's awakening, where the Buddha supposedly touched the earth and said, "The earth is my witness." So there's a variety, and generally they're symbols. Some people use them as Delanea mentioned, because energetically, there are a variety of ways to position your body. I think more popularly, people think of yoga and the ways that you position your body energetically. But it's a complex subject and very interesting. And I hope I answered your question.
You did. Delanea, are you anywhere besides Connecticut? Are you on the West Coast? Are you in the Midwest? Where are you? I mean, with your program?
Sure. So we just signed an agreement with the Center for Health Affairs in Northern Ohio, and they're kind of like a clearinghouse for 36 hospitals, including the Cleveland Clinic. So once they approve you, they then take your product or service and they sell it to their hospital system. So we're having our first call now that we have the signed deal this Friday. So to be sure that we're delivering marketing materials that are in line with how they like to sell. So we'll be there. We did get a call from a woman in Northern Detroit who's with Mercy Health, which happens to be part of the Trinity system. So in that example, Trinity actually, it's 93 hospitals across the country. So from day one, the folks in Hartford said, hey, if we do this trial with you, we won't want it for free for 90 days or free. That's what we said. We'll give it to you for free. We want to help people. They said, we want to know, we want it in for 2 years at least, because of course it's bad now, but we're mostly concerned about the second wave of COVID. How can we get this in place now and get it on everybody's, in everybody's life, so that when it comes back, people have a tool? But we also want to know what we charge other hospitals, the other 93. So we're like, well, at that rate, I mean, we could charge them not a lot a month per hospital, and that not a lot adds up to be a lot when it's 93 hospitals. Yeah, so, and then where else? So those are probably the big ones where we're starting to spread. And really it's about...
you have a carport you can use indoor and outdoor? This it's useful indoor and outdoor.
I'm on rogue, sorry. Yeah, so the more we can extend the sales team, we'll start to have a bigger footprint.
Well, we always like to kind of start on time and end on time. We have time for one more question. If somebody would like to ask Delanea our last question, raise your hand or.
Who's the ideal client?
Okay, so we have
hospitals right now. What they're really got momentum with hospitals, chiropractors.
So yeah, so an opportunity that just presented itself would be it's a 3,500 chiropractic association. So we're working on a deal with them where we're with our flexible technology, with our coding in our app, and the fact we have all this content created, we could, for as low as a couple of $100 a month, have chiropractic offices have their own branded version of the app to use with their patients. We know actually the biggest complaint chiropractors say that they hear from patients that they can't help them with is sleep. So when we look at our user statistics, I'd say 40% of the usage is for sleep. So yeah, so we'll be helping more people that way too.
Right. So I want to thank Delanea and Jay especially, for introducing us to Delanea, which for somebody who has not been in the world of mindfulness myself, I am certainly going to take a look at your MediMind and try to explore how I can incorporate that in my life. So I want to thank everyone. Next week we have Jim McGrath, who will be speaking. This is one of our sections where from loss comes good. He will be talking about his foundation in memory of his daughter, Victoria. She was injured in the Boston Marathon and then was killed in a car crash in Dubai. And so we will be learning about his recovery, his healing, the family's healing, and the good that has come that he is now doing. We have a number of people who are guests today that have joined us as a result of Delena's good work and Jay's good work to get other people to join us for our Pause for Purpose. And what I'd like to be able to do is your permission to send you emails, because we have these Pause for Purpose every Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Topics vary, and we'd encourage as many of you to join us if you can. And we just like your permission to be able to email our weekly updates in terms of who's coming up and who's speaking and who will be speaking the following week. So if you could, in your chat room, just send us your email and give us our permission to be able to contact you with future Pause for Purpose events that are coming up Wednesdays. Joyce, do you have anything you want to say?
I think that covers it. Just, yeah, let us know. Just leave an email if you want us to put you on our list. I guess every week it's a different topic, a different phenomenal speaker. And we're just thrilled to see all of you here, and thank you for joining us.